Hello. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you? I
I'm extremely well. Now, I know who you are, but can you
know who
introduce
you are.
yourself? Yeah. So, what is your name?
I am Andre Diniz, and you are.
I am Mecca,
That's
Kyoto. So I am very excited to talk to you today about something that I've known about coming for a while and kind of been on the journey with. But can you tell us what this Ripped in Two novel is all about?
yes. Of course, you're here to see this interview about Ripped in Two. It's a novel that I wrote, and then like my quick pitch about it is a paranormal drama, and it's a series. This is the first installment. And it's about this particular installment. It's about two souls. They're living in the woods of Massachusetts, and they find each other, fall in love. They want to live again, but they have no connection to a higher power. So they make a plan to enter the bodies of two people named Dane and Elijah. They're two kids, and they figure that if they live inside them very quietly and don't bother don't bother them, just help them, that once Dana and Elijah die of old age, that they can just follow them to wherever it is that souls go, meaning heaven, and they're asked to have a life of their own, so they can like consummate their love in their own physical bodies. But the story really goes through 25 years of both Dana and Elijah having a lot of psychological breakdowns and issues because there's two invasive energies inside of them. And it also follows through the therapy that they go with in their close relationship to a psychologist named Dr. Stevenson. So that's the book in a nutshell.
Quite a nutshell you got there.
And it's coming out on Amazon, both in the print paperback version and also you can download it in the digital version too. It's out on pre-sale, should be today if everything goes correctly, and then it's out actually out on April 21st. So yeah, so I'm really excited.
Wow, you should be. This is really, really exciting. This is really kind of telling of our times that we can get this book from you in a short period of time and read it, from the safety of our homes at the moment, and really not have to go anywhere to buy a book, even though it would be lovely to go out and buy a book at some point. But how do you feel about this timing that it's actually coming out alongside the COVID-19 crisis?
Well,
Um,
there were also two other interviews prior to this one, and I mentioned in those in a slightly different manner that I clearly could have not foretold, even though you and I are going to be talking about foretelling in some of those in this interview. Like, I really could have not foretold that it would, be coming out in a time like this where we're going through this very specific moment in history, a difficult time in many ways for everybody. And but to me, I think that as an artist, when something is ready to go and you're ready to share it, the timing matters. And to me, I think the main goal of the book and the story was for me to dive into what it would be like to have these characters, these main characters, go through the journey that they go. And honestly, lose grip of reality many times, lose grip of themselves, and fight really hard to help each other to come back to reality, come back and have a hold of themselves and know who they are and focus on the future and be in the present while doing it. And so to me, I you know, speaking from personal experience, when I have had moments in my life or periods of time where I felt like I was losing grip of myself or something, I know the anchors that have helped me and the tools that I have in order to keep myself, at bay. And I thought if the hope for me is that if people are reading it, and they're able to get something from it that will help them keep themselves anchored, keep themselves focused, keep themselves moving forward. To me, I'll feel like how I have been successful. So for me, whether or not, I was talking earlier to someone else and they're like, oh, it's such a difficult time to figure out what to do. We feel like we should be reading, 50 books. And at the same time, there are moments I don't feel like reading and so on. I understand it. There are moments I don't feel like doing anything either. And so, and if that's how you feel, that's what you should do. But either way, whether you acquire the book now or a year from now or 10 years from now, my intent behind it is still the same. It's to help focus and move forward, both like mentally and spiritually. So, which are two major things in the book.
Well,
Mental health and spiritual health.
Spiritual health. I think that's really what we're here to talk about today. Like, this is a special interview for me. I get to talk to a lot of people around the world about cool things, but this was really something that I was inspired to do, was to interview you properly about this book. And it just seemed so poignant and relevant at the time to do this long distance interview, because you're out in Los Angeles, California.
And you're in Orlando.
And I'm in Orlando, Florida. So just having that natural discussion, this is a little less formal of an interview, but our backgrounds are both not only theater and writing, but spirituality. Like I am doing all the meditation, facilitation and teaching, spiritual studies, and I'm a spiritual life coach out here in Orlando and beyond. So that's really the focus of today.
Fantastic singer, songwriter, performer, always. And like Meka and I, we met in high school back in 1928. I'm kidding. So long ago, and yet it feels not that long ago. So, but we did, and I think we were there for not necessarily the beginning of our artistic journeys, but we were there for what relatively feels, the beginning times of it. Yes. And also I feel like the beginnings of our spiritual journeys too, as we see them today, right? So I think it makes absolute sense. I feel like our works, we've been there. I was there when Meka surged, and when we were both doing musical theater in high school, and we were in plays together. And then I was there when, you were there when I started writing poetry, when you started writing poetry. I was there when you started writing music. You were there when I wrote music. There's all of that. And then, we've been there for our journeys. And I think, I actually wrote a woman show years ago that I performed, and you directed it. And
amazing experience.
Which, that one-man show will come back in the next couple of years. It's now going to be part of this universe that I'm creating. But, I think, it just makes sense that we would talk about that. I would save spirituality for this particular interview, because you're one of the most spiritual people I know.
Same. I think that part of the reason I'm a spiritual person is because of having you as an influence in my life and the conversations that we've grown together. And even when we were in high school, you gave me a book that was about spirituality. So it seems that you really gave me the opportunity to see life in a different way. And we just continued with that process, and watching you thrive in like New York City and doing off-Broadway shows, and me getting to be there in little different ways throughout the years was really exciting. I remember helping you build sets at Boston Conservatory.
So much. It's like,
yeah.
It's honestly like
selling tickets, at your off-Broadway show where Bjork was there.
You live in Japan, you live in Germany, your music changed and got influenced, and so and it's great, which is something that I was discussing with someone else earlier today, is finding our artistic community too.
Yes.
to help each other out, because you know an artist really can't, even if they're a solo artist or whatever, a writer, like a novelist, they really can't do it all by
Right.
themselves. It's absolutely impossible, and if you try it, you will not succeed. And so, right.
Right. I mean, it's all like, even, you know, as a musician, it's a lot to do with our art, you know, the way that we're presenting ourselves, you know, often the t-shirt design, you know, if it's an artist out in the Philippines that does that and brings in their story, and or the CD cover. Um, I know that, you know, you've written this incredible piece of literature by yourself, but then tell us about this incredible book cover that you have talking about artistic collaboration.
Yeah. So actually, this book cover is from another amazing artist, and her name is Alora Kate, and she is on Facebook. That's how you can reach her. Her professional page is all there, and I will make sure to add a link to Alora's page right here on this post. Um, so that you can reach out to her if you're writing, you need a cover for anything. She's fantastic. So I basically, you know, sat down with Alora over the phone, and I originally had acquired her name through you. Actually, Mecca, your
Oh,
sister is a novelist herself. Uh,
really
and
strong.
she, and Alora had done the covers of her books, and I
Yes,
really liked them.
Majors contracts.
I connected that way. Um, you know, and she's fantastic. I sat down with her and I mentioned to her what I was envisioning in this specific moment that you see in the cover here. Um, that's the lead character, Dana, at the grave, and the book starts there. And I said to her, it is the image to me that I think represents um, being ripped in two. I think the whole novel is about the juxtaposition of two things trying to figure their energies together. You know, it's about couples and your relationship to a psychologist, to a friend, and to your lover, to your
Right.
parents, and even in this particular novel, to your dad or your mom, never the two of them together. And it's always the book, really, to me, like even in numerology, it's powered by the number two. And so um, everything that you feel and see, to me personally, feels like the number two. And the struggles are always in pairs in this book. It's always a feel of being in pairs and then being pulled apart and then coming onto a new pair or a different pair, but always the struggle between pairs and not being able to quite be a threesome or foursome or group. Like it's always two, 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 two. And so I wanted to explore that too in that sense. But Alora really understood like what I wanted to convey in the energy of the cover, and she was able to put it there together. Woman just looming over a grave and with a skull, and having her look in the distance and the forest and with the tree behind her, and it was exactly
That'll
what
free.
fantastic. Just reach out to her. She's great. Very affordable and just super nice. But
And
yeah,
it really
I think we were
does
talking.
tell the story, what's inside.
Mhm.
Like, it's the perfect, the imagery does give me a really amazing hint, clue to the
Yeah.
mystery that's inside the cover. You know, it draws me in. I've got chills several times with you talking about it and describing it, which, you know, in spiritual terms, we call the chills of truth, like where it's really connected. And it, you know, if you're into the paranormal, like this is so, you know, relevant that, like, you know, the visual is bringing us into the story. Like it couldn't have been captured better. That the subtle tree drives me crazy. And I remember reading the intro to this book. I haven't read the whole book yet because I'm going to buy it today on Amazon. uh, but I was given little hints at it, and I got so many chills. It is so, it's like, not to like horror, but it is definitely going to suspend your view of reality. It's definitely going to pull you out of your comfort zone into this really incredibly stretched feeling till you really do end up feeling ripped. Like
That's,
it's
I mean,
terrifying in a good way.
and you know, there are horror elements in the book, and
Right.
story, but definitely it's powered, you know, by dramatic um, force and character. It's character driven for sure. So for me, I've always been interested since I was a child, really,
Yeah.
in things that are character driven, like movies and books, and I don't know, even a painting to me can be character driven. Like, you know, in fact, one of the, which I talked about in another interview, but one of the, you know, inspirations for the creation of this work was a specific painting. Listen to the other interview if you want to know which one it is. It's in the book too. The painting itself is mentioned. Uh, so I think it's, you know, I think I was mentioning earlier, it's great that like if you're able to be inspired by other artists and also to have a community that inspires you, that is able to like, you know, I couldn't have done this without people who read it originally, who bothered to sit down and read a novel and like give me feedback and guide me toward the right path for it, so that the intent behind it is understood clearly by as many people as possible. And so, and then, you know, here you are interviewing me, and then Alora helped with the cover. And so it's like, it's just, you know, and then the numerous people that I've asked for advice on many occasions throughout my life and in writing itself. And so, you know, especially understanding how, you know, I'm originally not American. I'm originally Brazilian. And so I moved to this country when I was 13 and had to master English for acting and for writing and understanding the dynamic of how the language works, you know, and so on. So, I mean, I really honestly have had a lot of help. And so I think it's about helping and about getting help, but you can't just always get help, you have to help as well. So you have to be willing to do both, right? So I think I'm pretty sure like in your, and it's been that way too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
One of my favorite memories of you, you know, when we were first connecting in our life journeys, you know, it was pretty obvious that, you know, we were going to stay close for our entire lives.
Totally.
Um, but I remember like you really were a writer, like great actor, great performer, very creative way of thinking, inspirational thinker, inspiration to me and everyone else around us. You were very motivational, very much have wisdom past this lifetime for sure. So you used to write from like just from like spirit, like you really were aware at a young age that you were like bringing in a spiritual influence. It was like channeling, you know, this connection.
And to me, it was like, it's a, you know, it's great that we're talking about this because I started really writing right when I moved to the US. I think like maybe a year later, I started writing poetry in English. And to my surprise, I couldn't really write poetry in Portuguese, but I,
Oh,
even the early poems that I had, it's that feeling that a lot of artists have talked about, that they feel like they create the work and
right.
then they feel like they didn't do it. And so sometimes it was kind of confusing to me. I'm like, oh, how did I just write this? I kind of don't even, I felt like I was in such a state that I didn't even really, I knew that I wrote it, but I didn't feel like I did. It was kind of like a confusing um, experience, but fun. And so it wasn't until I think years down the road that I heard of channeling. So I feel like I was doing that before um, I even knew what it was. And
Right.
you know, it's basically you're meditating and getting yourself into a state where you feel that your spiritual guide is channeling through you and guiding you through the story. Sometimes channeling can mean like literally actually taking the words from the guide and putting it to paper. Whereas I feel the way I feel like I channel is that I feel like a number of guides. I don't actually feel like it's always the same, though I do feel like there's like a specific guide
Yeah.
around me. Um, but I get visuals. I literally, to me, this is how I've always seen storytelling. Literally, I start with a visual in my head, a picture, and I just sit there in my room or wherever I'm writing, and I actually just watch it. I
Wow.
look at it, I wait for it to move, to get up and do something, or sometimes in my mind, I give the person a shove, or, so and then I kind of just write down what I'm seeing.
Right.
And yes, I do have a plot laid out. I'm not writing blindly. But a lot of times that plot changes as I go because, I mean, I think you do need a map, but then that map changes, as you go. And so I just allow what is being shown to me, like the visual, to guide how the story should be told. So to me, that's what channeling is. And like one of my favorite writers, well, not necessarily my particular favorite, because my favorite is definitely Stephen King,
Right.
and Neil Simon if you're talking theater. But to me, it was I read a book to kind of a few years ago of someone that I had heard of from the '60s. It's called The Set Material, and it's by a woman named Jane Roberts, and she was one of the main people that brought into like the spotlight the New Age era, as far as literature is concerned. And the way she did it is that she channeled a spirit that named himself Seth, and through Seth she wrote down um, a lot about how energies work and about the future of the planet and how the planet heals itself and doesn't, and how people heal themselves and don't, and just about the connection between everything and energy exchange. And so it was a very revealing um, book to me. And so look it up. There's a number of them, but the Seth Material, I think, is one of the best because it really encompasses a lot of what she channeled. I mean, it's 21 years of channeling.
Wow.
And so it encompasses a lot of that. So I would say, if you want to pick one to read, do that one. It's actually very timely if you are into that stuff.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I believe in it. I've had, paranormal and which is we're going to talk about here. It's like it's been in my life always. I came from a family that when I was very younger, like in my extended family, there were definitely experiences that they experienced and things that were happening that were good. And the paranormal is not just, bad or like a horror movie. There's a lot of good energy in the world too. And that to me is also part of spirit and part of paranormal.
I think, I mean, the main characters of your novel, Dana and Elijah, are psychic, right?
Yeah, they are. And so I wanted to start the series of the book with two main characters that were psychic, and I wanted to. I myself am one, and when I was younger, my very first experience was actually from an uncle that passed away. He had an accident, and I was 13. We had just moved to the United States. It had been less than a month. And he was only 4 years older than me. He had a car accident. And that same night, without getting a phone call, because we didn't have a phone yet, like a landline, because back then that's what you.
Wow.
I dreamt that he had passed. And without taking the time to explain what the dream was like, I woke up the next morning and I said, I believe something's happened and we need to call our family in Brazil. And I said, something's happened to him specifically. And sure enough, they said, yes, he's had an accident and so on. And then I also dreamt, he was in a coma for 3 days, I believe. And so I also dreamt that he was not going to recover. And I dreamt about him again the night he actually passed. And so that was definitely marking for me. And then since then, I sometimes open myself to experiences like that. Sometimes I don't. But as time went on, I, studied with different people, got guidance from different people, from different psychics and so on. And, the gift, as I said, has manifested in many different ways. And so I see the gift visually. I do. If I want to, I know how to control it now, and I can have visions of things that are occurring now, or sometimes, a bit into the future. And I can also hear words and guidance from energies that are around. And I've actually have done a lot of going into people's homes, sometimes strangers that I, meet right there, to help cleanse, to help a family or someone to get rid of certain negative energies and so on. And so I've done a lot of that, and I know a lot about it. I am not a master at it, and I don't claim to be like 100% correct in anything that I do, and in anything in life.
Very shaman of you to not claim to know everything.
I think it's all about practice and just kind of being able to take from it what you can. I think a psychic ability, it's a tool that you can use. It's an informative tool, right? So you can do with that information whatever you want. And sometimes the information can be cloudy. And so I think the best psychics are the ones that do not claim to be always correct. I think, you can get something wrong. It's life. It's normal. Like, no one's perfect. And so, but, I do my best. And so to me, it was very important that I had these characters that from childhood were experiencing things. Dana, as a main character in the book, she is able to see her father, who's passed away when she was 3 years old. And so from the age of 3, she's visited by him. And he kind of stays around for a long time of her life, guiding her. And then Elijah, who ends up being, who's also one of the main characters in the book, he has visions of the future, and he hears. And so they are drawn together, and so part of what's happening is that the psychologist who ends up taking care of them also is able to see spirits. And so then there's this whole struggle between the paranormal and the psychological part of, what's reality and what's not reality. Yeah. And you too, you also work as a spiritual,
Yeah.
what do you call it?
A lot of things. You're right. It's always trying to find the right word, because I think psychic abilities are a natural part of the human experience, and just some people develop them more than others. So I've been privileged enough to study with a lot of different shamans and Reiki healers, and I studied, my years in Japan. I studied with a different, Buddhist organizations, and I studied more recently with the Odyssey Institute of Healing Arts, which is about theta healing, and the continuation of that. And I do tarot card readings, and all the things, and it's a magical experience, but we only call it magic because we don't have the other words for it. But yeah. I mean, the things that we have seen through doing this higher self spiritual connection, I definitely I get visuals, and I'll see something, and I do my best to describe what I see to people. And sometimes it means nothing to me, but it sure does mean something to the person I'm telling it to. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, I see this, and this doesn't mean anything to me. And sure enough, that's exactly what they needed to hear. So it's a game of trust, even not judging it as your own human brain, but just letting what needs to come through for whatever person you're talking to. So these
And I can
characters are
as far as like um, her shaman work, alongside her tarot reading, alongside many of the things that she does, is excellent. And so I have had it done onto myself as well. I've had readings with her, and amazing. They're excellent. Very.
I think we've been spending years doing tarot card readings for each other. Um, and it's really it's amazing how much of a part of our lives that um, the psychic abilities are. And I've watched you while studying with shamans from like long lineages of like Siberian shamans, and you're doing the same type of clearings and connection to spirit, and even in your way of reading people's homes and knowing something and being able to go there, is you are already doing what a trained shaman would do. So it's cool.
Paranormal and psychic abilities and everything like that, it's like you said, I think everybody has some gift to it. It's whether or not you choose to tap on something or not. I think also too, as with anything in life, there's a lot of people who abuse it and do weird things to it, and throughout history that make people believe it or not. But I personally don't care if someone believes in it or not. Or I mean, I do know what my experience in it is, and I do try to use the knowledge I've acquired to help. And so I just don't worry about the people who don't. I think it's fine. I don't think everybody has to believe in it, because I think part of the human condition is to have people from all sorts of backgrounds and beliefs and so on. So it's okay that not everybody has the belief I have. And so
it's part of it, isn't it? That everyone gets to have a different perspective.
Yeah. And so to me, I just kind of like gravitate toward the people I know I can help, who help me as well. And who kind of like are around the same-ish, doesn't have to be exactly the same, but same-ish mindset,
Right.
And as I was writing too, I wanted to make sure that like one of the things I did in the story is that to me, I think I mentioned in the first interview with Melinda actually about this book. They're all here on Facebook and on my website and so on. So if you missed it, go back and look. That when it came to like religion, I didn't really want to dive into religion in the book because that's not the story, right? I wanted, the characters have their own thoughts and beliefs, but that's not what's driving the story as far as religion. And so because I mentioned that it's about a spirit entering someone else, I didn't want to deal with any themes of like possession or things that are like horror. Like I wanted to deal more with the psychology of how do you relate to just another energy being so close to you. So the parallel is more like a deep friendship, a deep love, a deep mother and daughter bond, or a deep bond that comes from another lifetime to this lifetime. And I wanted to kind of that's the dynamic I wanted to play off and to kind of explore. And even the psychics in the story, this is not a story where they're like, oh, I'm a psychic and some people believe me, some don't, and there's all of the I'm tormented. It's not, I didn't want to go and explore that because I think those themes have been already explored. So what I wanted to know is like a psychic trying to figure out what do they do with the gift? How do they learn to interpret it? And when they do interpret it incorrectly, how do they deal with that? And so, because it is a kind of a big responsibility. And so, and then if you happen to have some kind of relation to a spirit, how do you manage that? And so I think I wanted to skip over the whole like crowd that believes it or not. And so I just kind of like dive into relationships that and the struggle, even the relationship with yourself, like, and I think
Wow.
basically in the focus of the
So a lot of people talk about how art and creating art like this can be therapeutic for people to read this. Do you think that, what type of experience would you like your reader to have with this material?
um for I do hope that it is a spiritual experience for them because there are themes of like past life, there's themes of moving on after that, death, channeling. Like one of the main characters, Elijah, in the story becomes a writer himself, and he channels um, in the novel. And there's those things happening. And so I think I hope that people can see that like there's many levels to spirituality, right? And then at any given point, not everyone is just happy with it all the time, and people question things, and people are mad at it sometimes. People are embracing it, sometimes pushing it away, tired of it, wanting more of it. Um, so they go through a lot of, it's a relationship. I think a relationship to a city that you live in, or that these characters live in, they talk about because they move to different cities in the story. And your relationship to New York City, to the Berkshires in Massachusetts, to wherever you are, it's so important. So like your relationship to spirituality, it's important
Yeah.
too, and it changes. And so I hope that people can trust by reading this, long journey that these characters go through of 25 years, right? I hope that people can be like, okay, even at the times where I'm going mad and then like losing it or extremely happy, whatever, you just like trust as best as you can the journey and like listen to pay attention to the signs that are being given you, because whether or not you believe you're a psychic or not doesn't matter. Signs and guidance is being given to you on a daily basis, and it's up to you to either see the signs or not, take them in, interpret them however you want. So to kind of like maybe help you, have patience and see the signs, trust the journey. It's
Wow.
trying to lead you into a healing place. And so
Wow.
after you pass, it's still, it's my personal belief, but the characters in the novel also believe that after you pass, you do go on to another plane of existence. And so yeah, so I want people to just kind of know that it's okay. Like as they're reading it, no, it's
Yeah.
a long process.
It really is. I mean, 25 years span is talking about their relationship. Um, but, I know something that I think the public doesn't know yet. That
No.
there's this entire universe that you've created.
Mhm.
It's called the Torn Skin universe.
Yeah, and so yeah, I definitely want to mention that too. And
Oh my, yes.
yeah, so the way like the whole torn skin universe, I mentioned it in another interview too, but I mentioned it from a different point of view. So this is coming from this angle now. I originally had the idea for it, and it's here comes a paranormal-ish experience, right? How it came to me. So I was living with a dear friend who practices Wicca, and I literally did not know much about it. And I had a dream one night that I was being visited by a man who took me to a watchtower. It's a very vivid dream. And he spoke in his mind in the dream. And when I arrived at the tower, it looked like there were 5 floors in the dream, and it was all made of desert around me. And there were 3 other men standing, and he kind of said, "Let's go inside and pay attention to everything that's in the tower." And it was all golden artifacts, and it was all like apples and knives and forks and plates and so on. And I remember thinking, "Oh, this is food for thought." And so I got to the 5th level, and it was only me and he, the original person who approached me in the dream, got to the entrance to the 5th level, and he goes, "I'm going to leave you here, and when you're ready, come down." And when he did that, I kind of freaked out in the dream, and I didn't know why I was there. And I knocked on the door, and I said, "I want to get out of here. I'm not sure. I think I'm supposed to figure something out later." And he goes, "All right." So as I was leaving the tower, I asked his name. He told me his name was West. And so I woke up, and I felt like he had something to do with my friend who I lived with, because he was doing Wicca. The spirit also said, "Say hello to your roommate." And so I thought it had something to do with him. And so but I could not take the image of that watchtower out of my mind. I actually drew it and gave it to my roommate. And it wasn't until like weeks later that I was walking down the street in New York City, and suddenly it dawned to me. I said, "I wonder if this has something to do with Wicca." And so I went online, and I found there was something called the Guardians of the Watchtower, which are 4 spirits, north, south, east, and west. And they do visitations like this in dreams. And one of them approaches you first, and the other 3 kind of stay in the background. And then you go up the tower, and what's in the tower matters. And there's a lot of stuff there that is informational to what you should be doing.
Wow.
And so I was surprised because I had no idea of that. And I know that, like, in my research later, you know, they come from like the ideas of the archangels, Uriel, Raphael, Michael, and Gabriel.
Right.
And you know, the elements earth, air, fire, and water. So where West falls into is I think Gabriel and also water, you know. But they are directional. So the way they showed up to me was through directions, right? So I was doing a trip in the Grand Canyon like a year later, right? And my friend who was with me said, "Oh, we should go." We were on the south rim of the Grand Canyon. She goes, "We should take this desert view drive. And it's 25 miles of this and that and ruins and blah, blah, blah." And at the very end, there's a watchtower, and she showed me a picture of it. And it was exactly the watchtower I had dreamt of. And so I was like, "We're going." So I got there. It was 5 floors. We went up on the 5th floor, and I was up there by myself. Oddly, even though there were people visiting the tower, I was up there for about an hour on my own. No one went up there. And I felt like I had a lot of things revealed to me about what was to come concerning my life. And I usually, even though I am able to have visions about other people's situations, I usually have a hard time seeing things for myself.
Right.
And I was able to see a lot. And one of the things that came to me while I was up in that watchtower in the Grand Canyon in the South Rim was that I was going to write a book that had to do with characters moving throughout time and space. And I saw that it was going to be a series of 10 novels with other things attached to it, other pieces of work. And that one of the main characters was going to be called Dana. And I just knew that it was mainly going to be about reincarnation, which is what the whole entire series is about. And they reincarnate and live together as a group in different times in different countries.
Huh.
And so at the time, I didn't know the timing of any of it, when it was going to happen, when I was going to start. But it was also revealed to me that in that dream of the watchtower, prior to me being in the actual watchtower, that I will be moving to California, which is West, which was the name that directed me in the dream. So So yeah, so that's where it started. And so basically it's the Ripped in Two is the first installment of what I'm calling the Torn Skin universe, which is, like I just said, it's a series of novels. They are intertwined and characters are living in different lives. But it does have an arc, of course. And then also I'm calling the Torn Skin universe has what I'm calling main cuts and side cuts. The main cuts are their 10 novels. The side cuts are works that are attached to those 10 novels. For example, one of the main characters, Elijah, who is a writer, he writes in Ripped in Two. He writes an anthology of poems and short stories called Variations of Time and Nature. So the second installment of the Torn Skin universe should come out later this year, and it is that anthology, Variations of Time and Nature, written by Elijah, of course, written by me. So I am writing that anthology through the voice of Elijah, and it should give you further insight on who he is as a writer and his relationships in his life and events that happened and Ripped in Two, how he turned those events into a poem or a short story or something artistic, which is what we do, right? We collect from our lives and create art from it. And so it's interesting to me and hopefully interesting to the reader to see something like that. So the side cuts, which are attached to the main works, are works that characters have created throughout the 10 novels, right?
Mhm.
And Meka, actually, I wanted to mention is already, because of course, I've been writing ahead. And so there's a lot of stuff already written further ahead, almost ready to be out too in the near future. And Meka is actually a character, and it's the one character so far that I picked to be in. She's such an inspiration, personal to me. She's actually part of the Torn Skin universe. There is a musical that in a further installment is written called Satellites of Uranus. And it's with the music of Meka. So Meka and I have discussed for a long time about writing something like a rock opera or musical. And
Absolutely.
so the idea would be that once that installment comes out, that hopefully we'll get to actually sit down at some point and write it so that we can have it be a side cut of the Torn Skin universe, which
Yes.
would be amazing. Already I know for a fact in the second installment, which right now is preliminarily called The Shedding, which should come out next year. Already I know that
I love these titles.
is mentioned in that second installment. So it's talked about.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, can you believe it?
I can't believe it. It's so exciting. It's so exciting. I have to say the titles Ripped in Two, the Torn Skin universe, the Shedding, these are so provocative.
Mhm.
They're really compelling titles. It gets me, like, I get chills, I get excited, I feel so um, connected to the allure of these pieces. There is that richness already in this feeling of them being this, like, pulling us in.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, like with the idea of Torn Skin, I wanted all the 10 novels to have some feeling of being torn, right?
Right.
And
Reincarnation is a feeling of being torn from different identities.
yeah, and but the thing is, sometimes you have different titles, right? So originally, I don't worry about titles too much. I just start the work and then the title will come to me at some point. So originally I called this Dana and Elijah. And then eventually, at one point, and actually I think it was in the third draft, I just realized that it should be called Ripped in Two. And I talk about more about that in that other interview, the first interview that I did.
Nice.
I changed the name and how it came up. And so, because I wanted all the titles to have something like that, but I'm pretty certain that the second novel will be called The Shedding because the shedding is actually something really important in that novel. It's like a ritual that happens. And so
Wow.
with the main character of that, who is actually a character in this novel in Written 2, he becomes the main character of the second novel. And then characters from this novel also appear in that one too. So yeah, there's a lot to come. And I hope that people enjoy it and that people get something out of it. I know I'm enjoying it. And I know
Oh,
that writing from the heart. And I hope that speaks to some people. Nothing can speak to everyone, but I mean, for God's sake, the Beatles are like a huge influence in my life, and I, for a fact, know people who dislike the Beatles, and I, in fact, know someone who absolutely hates them. So, no one can be,
can't please everyone.
no artist can appease everybody.
But
There's a
that's why it's art, because it's supposed to have opinion. It's supposed to have contrast. It's supposed to make you feel something, you know? And if it made everyone feel the same way, that's not art, you know?
no,
I mean, people don't feel the same way about a glass of water.
I think
Yeah,
just as it's important to know why something spoke to you, it's important to know why something didn't speak to you, but speaks
right.
to people. I think, I never really discard anything as like garbage or, oh, that's this or that. Like, I'm never dismissive like that. In fact, I often give feedback to people in many artistic forms, right? And so,
Right.
to me, I always think that I always try to see what the vision is, and I always try to bring that vision out in however I can help. And and I'm always mindful, if your goal is to appease everyone, you're not going to succeed, because not one single person ever in the history, no artist in the history, I don't want to say person, but like artist in the history of the world has ever done it. And it's not going to happen.
Right.
So, but it's basically how to appease yourself and
Wow.
treat
Yeah.
yourself so that someone else can take something out of it. And so, yeah.
Beautifully said. Thank you for letting us into your universe.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for being such an influence in my life too. So I appreciate you coming together and reading this. It's out today. Out on Amazon for pre-sale, so get it. I personally love paperbacks, so get whatever you are able to get. But I love paperbacks, and I have a copy myself, and it just feels so good to hold it. And I just come from the school of I need it in my hand. So, but if you don't, it's still great on digital as well. It's the same story.
It's so cool. I love that it can just be shipped to our house.
Yeah,
So, because I'm gonna order I want the physical copy. I
Howard.
do want a signed copy. I want you to sign my copy at some point.
Totally arranged. I have signed copies of your albums too. So,
Thank
but thank you so much for
you
doing
so much.
this, and I appreciate it. And I hope people go, and there's a link to Meka's website here in this post as well, where you can like listen to her music, and it will take you to everywhere her music is available. And she has amazing stuff. She has a beautiful song about to come out soon, which is called Beautiful Night.
Yeah.
And so it's excellent. I've already listened to it because I have. So, and it's great, and I think people will love it. And so, yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I can't wait to talk to you more about this entire process. So I will be constantly posting, so everybody on my social media and my world will be cheering you on. So awesome. So many blessings. We wish you so much luck with all of this.
Stay safe, stay home, stay inside, because this is what we're doing now. Save lives.
Good
Yeah.
advice. Thank
Bye.
you, Andre.